grantees. Fourth, we'll outline mechanics of the timeline and process for submission. And then finally, we'll spend the remainder of our hour answering any questions. To cover the resources, on Kresge's current funding opportunities page, which you have a hyperlink here to, you can find several resources to help you prepare the submission. These include, first, the main document, or what we call the Funding Opportunities Guidelines. This shares in writing much of what we will share on this webinar. We will refer to this document throughout the webinar. Consider it the foundational text about Boost. This document also includes links to important resources referenced throughout the webinar. For example, reports and resources from Jobs for the Future and Ascend at the Aspen Institute. The second resource is the Narrative Questions Preview. This is a Word document outlining the narrative questions for the letter of inquiry, or Phase 1. You'll find included in this document character count limits to help guide your responses. This will help you initially develop your narrative responses outside of our grants management portal called Fluxx. The third resource is a frequently asked questions. This will be updated throughout the application period as we receive questions that have broad relevance. We will update this again by Monday to reflect broadly relevant questions fielded on today's call. The fourth resource is a budget template. This is an Excel spreadsheet that can help you develop your budget request. And fifth and finally, we have a Fluxx guide and preview. This is a PDF providing a preview and instructions for completing the letter of inquiry in our grants management portal called Fluxx. We'll share more about Fluxx at the end of this webinar. Now I'll turn it over to Stephanie to introduce the foundation.
Thanks, Bethany. Kresge is a private national foundation that works to expand opportunities in America's cities. We use many tools to achieve this goal, including grant making and social investments. We work in program areas that include arts and culture, education, environment, health, human services, and community development in Detroit. We have an explicit focus in cities. It's because more than 80% of Americans with low incomes live in America's cities, which puts them on the front line of our nation's most pressing challenges. We see cities as a platform to drive lasting prosperity, to close the widening gap between rich and poor, to promote equity and expand opportunity. So let me tell you a little bit about the Education and Human Services team. We also share a mission to expand opportunity through complementary strategies. The Human Services program is focused on achieving systems change that accelerate social and economic mobility for children and families using a racial equity lens. To give you a better sense of our work, we would like to share a brief video about the Human Services team's strategy.
In this era of record low unemployment, the American economy appears to be humming along. But dig a little deeper, and it's a different picture for many Americans, especially those living near or below poverty. The official unemployment rate is around 4%, yet 14% of Americans were out of work in 2017. Unemployment is compounded along racial lines. In a 20-year period, the median wealth of Black households decreased by 75%. For Latinos, it decreased by 50%. While whites saw an increase of 14%. The Human Services Program at the Kresge Foundation wants to help people move up the social and economic ladder toward achieving the American dream. Our vision for how to expand opportunity for those who live in America's cities is to accelerate and advance social and economic mobility for children, youth, and families through person-centered, multi-level systems change driven by innovation at the local level. We define person-centered as a practice that is strength-based and believes people are inherently capable and resilient and can operate with self-agency. It also includes a focus on creating pathways to opportunity, not just crisis stabilization or triage. To ignite this transformation, the Human Services Program at Kresge focuses its grant making in two key areas: fostering the next generation of human services organizations, and accelerating place-based opportunity ecosystems. To build a more robust human services field, we partner with nonprofits and local and county government agencies that are person-centered, outcomes-based, data-driven, and focused on racial equity. Through our Next Generation initiative, we are gaining momentum by expanding the adoption of a whole family approach. as well as a greater understanding of how toxic stress can play a role in perpetuating poverty. Second, we focus on place in our work. Through our place-based opportunity ecosystem strategy, we focus on propelling cross-sector local efforts with an outcomes orientation anchored by public and nonprofit human service organizations in cities across the country. These efforts alone cannot advance social and economic mobility. We build on this body of work by enabling supportive, aligned public policy change and ideas. We believe that our country is stronger when we collectively support the well-being of our people and our families and help make their dreams become reality. We need to meet people where they are and where they dream. Join us on our journey to put more Americans on a path towards social and economic mobility.
I just want to address one of the comments or the questions. This video is available on the Kresge website, and we will update the FAQ to include a link to this video, and another one we'll show in a moment. If you have already read the funding opportunity guidelines, you will see that Boost builds on the next gen work that was described in that video and connects very closely to our education team work. So I'd like to turn back over to Bethany to talk about the education team.
Thanks, Stephanie, for providing that introduction to the Human Services team. For nearly 10 years, the education team has focused on increasing college access and success for low-income students and students of color. We firmly believe, and evidence suggests, that post-secondary education is increasingly needed to achieve social and economic mobility in the 21st century economy. While our program has 3 different grant-making portfolios, Boost fits most squarely on our portfolio focused on strengthening and aligning urban higher education ecosystems. The following video outlines that work.
Getting an education beyond high school is the key to economic mobility in the U.S. College grads earn more, are healthier, and are more civically engaged. But while 70% of students from higher income families complete a bachelor's degree by age 25, only 10% of low-income students do, and stubborn gaps in degree completion by race and ethnicity remain. Nearly half of today's college students come from low-income families. In 2016, nearly 40% of all college students received Pell Grants. Today's students live complex lives and often lack support. Low-income and underrepresented students often come from high schools with student-to-counselor ratios twice the national average. They also face many challenges outside the classroom. A 2017 survey found 36% of community college students report being food or housing insecure, and 9% were homeless. 26% of all college students today are parents, and many students struggle to access transportation to get to class at all. Transferring credits between institutions isn't easy, and low-income or students of color are less than half as likely to successfully transfer and graduate from a new school. Many low-income students go to schools close to home, in urban areas. So this is a city problem with a city solution. The Kresge Foundation works with partners to build stronger urban higher education ecosystems, to put students' needs at the center, creating clear access and transfer pathways for students within a geographic region, connecting degrees to the local economy, and helping students access federal, state, and local social services. We need an urban higher education ecosystem that truly supports students so they can learn, grow, graduate, and succeed.
As called out in the video, the education team has supported innovative partnerships between human service, nonprofits, and community colleges within our urban higher education ecosystem portfolio. This initiative will enable us to intentionally and strategically welcome more partnerships to our portfolio. As you can see by the 2 videos, education and human services teams have mutually reinforcing and overlapping strategies. Therefore, it only seemed natural for us to partner on an effort like Boost. In fact, rooted in our 2 sectors, both teams have seen the need for greater intentional collaboration. From the higher ed perspective, we know that students are often juggling work, family, and school. Nearly 1 in 5 or nearly 1 in 4 college students are parents, so higher education is really a family affair. The critical supports human services nonprofits provide could lead more students to persist and graduate. Meanwhile, we also know that many youth and adults supported by human services nonprofits do not receive adequate support to connect to high-quality educational pathways that lead to family-sustaining jobs. Many times, the same families are served by community colleges and human service organizations, yet there is no structured way to identify and support those families. Additionally, the college focuses on the parents, while the human services nonprofits may serve either the parent or the child, often not both. Recognizing the opportunity to provide broad, holistic, two-generation supports to families striving to achieve the American dream, the college and nonprofit staff have built relationships, or in some cases, even individual programs to support family success. We see Boost as an opportunity to build on this in a more systemic way that actually meets the needs of parents and children together. In addition, another challenge we've noticed that both community colleges and human service organizations face is helping students or clients transition into family-sustaining careers. Too often for low-income Americans, we hear about placement into jobs with little opportunity for growth and with wages that cannot support a family. New research from Jobs for the Future puts forward a conceptual framework for occupations that offer the strongest opportunities for financial stability and true economic advancement. They've identified Springboard jobs are those with strong professional and income growth over time, and lifetime jobs, those jobs typically well paid with long-term stability but little occupational advancement. This idea may seem simple, but this goes beyond traditional approaches to understanding the local labor markets. We recommend you review the Jobs for the Future paper cited in the Funding Opportunity Guidelines to gain a stronger understanding of lifetime and Springboard jobs framework. It may not be possible to replicate Jobs for the Future's and Burning Glass Technologies methods, but we are looking for new and interesting ways to identify and map high-quality career trajectories in local communities. We will be asking applicants to think about what jobs within their community fit within the Springboard and Lifetime Jobs framework. Now I'll turn it back over to Stephanie to provide more details on the funding opportunity that builds on this understanding of the current state of our fields.
Thank you, Bethany. We're happy to announce Boost and this opportunity to the field. Boost aims to strengthen existing partnerships between community colleges and human services nonprofits that help current and future students secure family-sustaining employment. In contrast to prior efforts outlined in the Funding Opportunity Guidelines, Boost gives equal standing to both partners and focuses on the partnership. Through these partnerships, we are looking to bring together educational pathways, supportive services, and careers. In bringing together these elements, Boost may remove barriers such as lack of knowledge about high-quality educational programs, the need to juggle multiple responsibilities such as work and family, inadequate childcare, food and housing insecurity, and other barriers identified by the community. In addition to programmatic efforts, Boost will ideally enable organizational reforms and systemic change. Examples of this might be improved cross-sector coordination, strengthened data systems and outcomes metrics, new financing models, and other policies and practices that support social and economic mobility for large numbers of people with low income. Now let's turn to the nuts and bolts of this opportunity. We're looking to strengthen up to 8 partnerships with grants of $450,000 over 3 years. As referenced in the Funding Opportunity Guidance, we're looking to support existing partnerships. I'm sure many existing partnerships have wish lists or ideas of how they could achieve greater impact if only they had the resources. Think of Boost as this opportunity, the catalyst to bring your partnership's work to the next level. It might be improving cross-institution data systems, adapting and improving intake processes, research and evaluation, or a whole host of activities that could bolster your work. Beyond the grant funding, we see that partnerships selected for this opportunity will have other benefits. Generally, we seek to build a cohort that will learn together and demonstrate proof points. In more concrete terms, members of the cohort will participate in convenings, likely twice a year starting in early 2020, engage in evaluation to support learning by the participants and the foundation, and receive technical assistance anchored in the collective needs of communities. We will source TA needs from the letter of inquiry received. As you prepare your application, there are 3 eligibility requirements as part of this opportunity. First, the partnership must be in a city that adheres to the U.S. Census Bureau's definition of a metropolitan statistical area that contains a city of 50,000 or more people. Second, you should have a human services nonprofit that seeks to advance social and economic mobility for their clients through a 2-generation whole family approach. And the nonprofit should exhibit the qualities of the next generation human services organization. You can learn more about the quality of NextGen from the Funding Opportunity Guidelines and our website. Finally, the community college in this partnership must be an Achieving the Dream member. There's a lot of information on this next slide. Once we review applications against the eligibility criteria, it will be reviewed against the selection criteria shown on this slide. I'll give you a moment to read it, and also note that it is in the Funding Opportunity Guidelines. We ask that you review these carefully as you craft your application. Next, I'll pass this back to Bethany.
Thank you, Stephanie. To arrive at the 8 partnerships, there will be a multi-phase selection process as outlined on this slide. The first step is for one of the 2 partners to register for an account with Kresge's online grant portal called Fluxx. This should be done by July 17th. The second step is submitting a letter of inquiry, or phase 1, by July 26th. We'll cover what's needed in this phase on a future slide. In mid-August, the Kresge Foundation will make an initial notification to the applicants informing them whether they've moved forward to the next phase. For a select few, the third step will be a virtual site visit and a full proposal submission due by late September. The process will end in early November when the 8 selected partnerships are approved, and grants are scheduled to begin on December 1st. Before we review what's required in phase 1, we thought it might be helpful to clarify some terms because this application relies heavily on partnerships, specifically the partnership between a community college and the human services nonprofit, but requires one organization to take the lead in our grants management portal called Fluxx. The lead applicant can be the community college or the human services nonprofit. You're best positioned to make that decision. The lead partner registers in Fluxx, completes the organizational information required by Fluxx, and if selected, will enter into an agreement with Kresge and receive the grant funding, which in turn can be distributed to other partners needed to accomplish the work. The community college and the human services nonprofit are the primary partners, and they will complete the designated sections in Fluxx, collaborate on the joint questions, and then submit at least letters of support. We'd ideally prefer memorandums of understandings that already exist between those 2 primary partners. Now for more about phase 1. The partnership will have to submit several key pieces of information. The first is general information in the Fluxx system, things like contact information, mission statement, demographic data. This should be completed by the Fluxx registrant, or as we just established, the lead applicant. We recommend you review the Fluxx preview and guidelines that was linked to on the current opportunities page, as well as go into Fluxx as soon as possible to create that account and familiarize yourself with the system. The second piece is going to be a narrative description of the partners and the work. As referenced above, the narrative questions are broken into 3 parts: primary community college partner, primary human services nonprofit, and joint questions. Third, we're going to be requesting a preliminary budget and a corresponding budget narrative that explains with words that budget request. Fifth, as previously stipulated, we'll be looking for letters of support or hopefully memorandum of understanding between the 2 partners, the 2 primary partners. Please note, if the submission does not have a letter of support from both the community college primary partner and the human services nonprofit primary partner, it will be disqualified from review. Lastly, we also will be looking for census data for your metropolitan statistical area. Unfortunately, we're catching the Census Bureau in the middle of a website update, and it is currently being redesigned. Please go back to the FAQs after July 1st, and we'll have some instructions for you all on how to download data for your metropolitan statistical area. That concludes the end of our formal webinar presentation, and we're happy to start answering questions now. Our staff member has been chronicling the ones that have already come through, and we'll start taking those now. I have the first one, and it's a two-part question, I think answering multiple requests from attendees. The first part is, does the college need to be a current member of ATD, or can it be a past member? And secondly, does the college have to be a member of ATD? Great questions. For this funding opportunity, yes, we are requiring the community college partner to be an ATD member or to have been an ATD member in the past. For colleges that are no longer part of the ATD network, we will be requesting as part of the Fluxx narrative questions the dates that you were in the ATD network. We found it important to restrict this initial funding opportunity to Achieving the Dream colleges for 3 reasons. First, ATD helps build foundational skills such as data capacity necessary for successful community partnerships that deliver improved outcomes. Second, participation in the ATD network signals that the institution, the community college, shares the foundation's commitment to advancing more equitable outcomes for students. And third, working with its members, ATD has already pioneered several efforts like the Working Student Success Network and the Community College Women Succeeds initiative, on which this funding opportunity builds. That information is also available in the FAQ already uploaded on the site.
I'm seeing several questions asking about human service organizations and whether they're eligible or not. So I would, and actually, how does Kresge define a human services agency? Does it include government agencies and nonprofits, or one or the other? So for this opportunity, we're seeking for the primary partner from the human services side to be a nonprofit, meaning it has 501c3 status. We are following a definition by the Alliance for Strong Families and Communities that they provide and lead an array of programs such as counseling, education and enrichment, adoption, foster care, workforce development, neighborhood revitalization, and civic engagement and advocacy. The human service organization, we also believe, should demonstrate the next gen attributes, which are listed in the funding opportunity, as well as apply to generation approaches. And we'd advise you check out Ascend at the Aspen Institute's website for guidance on that.
I have a related question that asks, can a community college partner with multiple services, multiple human services agencies, or only one? We are open to partnerships, sort of one to many, though we do ask that you identify one primary human services nonprofit who would be your core partner. And then there is the option on the application to identify other human service partners who could provide other supportive services. Stephanie, do you want to add anything to that answer?
Nope, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Great. Another question asks, can we send a draft of the LOI to Kresge staff prior to submission to get feedback? Unfortunately, at this time, we will not be able to give individualized feedback to applicants. We are looking to try to maintain a fair, equitable, and consistent process for all applicants. We will, as evidenced by this webinar, respond to questions that are broadly relevant to multiple audiences. It looks like we have a cluster of questions around our definition of city. I think some of these came in before we addressed this in the webinar. Stephanie, do you want to go over that again?
Sure. So within this opportunity, we're using the U.S. Census Bureau's definition of a metropolitan statistical area that contains a city of 50,000 or more people. So if you go to the Census Bureau website, you can look up what those MSAs are. And then we'll also be asking you to supply an attachment related to that. But again, we mentioned the Census Bureau website is under redesign at the moment, so we will update next week when it is fixed.
So a related question is, does this support colleges and organizations located in commuter belts around major cities? And I would say generally if those commuter communities are part of the metropolitan statistical area, yes, it would include them. Stephanie, this looks like a question for you for human services. Is an organization like the United Way an eligible lead nonprofit, or must the partner be a direct service provider?
I would say in most cases, United Ways would be eligible applicants. I would refer you to the FAQ at the top of page 2. We have the specific question. Preferably, the organization would be providing direct services, but they might also have several partners that deliver elements of a service approach.
Great. Another question that is at the intersection of higher education and human services. So Stephanie, maybe you'll start the answer and then I'll chime in. Do families from the human services nonprofit need to be students at the college?
So ideally, the two organizations have partnered in the past. So there may be some clients of the human service organizations that are enrolled in the community college, but maybe there's not been a formalized mechanism to understand how they're co-enrolled on both sides. And this could be an opportunity to systematize this in some way.
I would also add that I think with this initiative, we're both looking to, yes, promote college success for groups that have been traditionally underserved by the sector, but we're also looking to help support new entrants into college. So if there is human services nonprofit clients who could benefit from the educational pathways that are offered by a community college, yes, we should figure out an inroad to have them land on campus and access those programs. So I see it as just very much an access and a success play in terms of the higher education world. The next question is, can a large research university apply with a nonprofit and community college in the ATD network? I'll take this question to start. Yes, a large research university could be as part of the partnership, but either the nonprofit or the community college would have to be the lead applicant, and they would have to come to the table with the other partner. And then they could also bring that research university to the table, say in more of a research and evaluation role, or whatever sort of complementary set of services the university is bringing to the table. So the short answer, you can be part of the partnership, but you can't be the lead applicant or one of the two primary partners. This is another good question. Can a community college be a lead on one application and a partner on another? I would, our initial answer, and I think this is one to look back at the FAQ for, is we would really like you and your local community to determine before a submission happens, what is your best request to the Kresge Foundation, and really put forward one that might require more conversations at a community level about what is the best partnership and project to put forward, but I think that would make for the most competitive application. Next question, can a community college district apply if only 2 of the 4 colleges are ATD members? This is a great question, and one that we had actually had some conversations with our excellent partners at ATD about. We are open to community college districts applying, but when they select the campuses that will also be participating, those campuses need to be ATD members as well. So that would suggest in the case for this individual that 2 of the 4 colleges could be named in the application and be seen as partners to the effort. All right, we've got more questions coming in. Can a national human service agency apply for a multi-city initiative? Stephanie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, this is another question that we've discussed. We really see this as a city-based partnership. So we would prefer that locally driven solutions, especially from a local human service organization, drives work at their city level and within a single MSA. However, we can consider how a national entity might play some sort of supporting role. Anything to add?
Now, moving on to additional questions. Is there a match requirement? That's a great question, and Kresge has often used matching challenge grants and prior funding opportunities. For this one, we have not stipulated that as a requirement, but it is always helpful to see local buy-in for any partnerships or projects, and so it can only help your application if you have additional funds that you're bringing to the table. Another question here, are direct services to students an allowable cost? I think we would have to unpack that a bit more. We definitely are open to costs, sort of the grant supporting staff who would engage directly with students. Trying to think of other ways to interpret this question.
Yeah, so, yeah.
What's off the table, I can say, is things like scholarships or gas cards or emergency financial aid programs. We really are looking to have this centered more on the partnership and building that cross-sector collaboration and arcing up from any sort of direct student interventions into more organizational reforms that will help you serve many students better, or even possibly think about greater systems level change or policy implications of your work. Anything to add to that?
No, I think that makes sense. I could see some circumstances where there were a needs analysis done and some additional work, there could be a small pilot, but we're really not looking for small boutique programs. We're looking for the types of reforms that can impact large numbers of students and clients.
That actually leads well into the next question we just got. Is there a minimum number of participants that need to be served? So we haven't established a threshold for number of participants served, though I think implicit or explicitly in what Stephanie's comments were is we really are looking for things that are trying to make change at scale. And we, in the funding opportunities narrative, talk a little bit about the different ways you can think about scaled change. So we would refer you to the funding opportunities and specifically the selection criteria within that document. Anything to add to that question?
No, I think that's great.
We have a number of questions, it sounds like, about what institutions are allowed and not allowable. I don't think we have any prescriptive interventions. Sorry, what interventions are allowable or not allowable. Outside of the sort of the cases that I've already given, you know, we're not supporting scholarship dollars, we're not supporting emergency financial aid programs, we're not supporting gas cards, those type of things. I don't think we have a preconceived notion about what would not be allowed. We can give this more thought, and we'll definitely have a question on the FAQ about what cannot be funded through this initiative. So we have another question. Can you partner with orgs that are not human services nonprofits as part of, such as a professional development organization? So again, with this funding opportunity, you need to have most definitely a primary community college partner or a primary community college district partner and a human services nonprofit partner. In addition to those two primary and core partners, you can have other partners to help you deliver the work. We will say we're not looking for the extensive list of anyone that you've ever partnered with to better support low-income adults in your community, but looking at folks who are substantively and materially contributing to achieve the outcomes of greater social and economic mobility for your residents. Stephanie, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I would agree. I know most human service organizations could probably list 50 partners in the community. We're not necessarily looking for that. We're looking at which partners are going to help you make the systemic reforms you're eyeing toward.
So that flows nicely into another question we're receiving. How many partners can join together on an application? So in essence, we want the main two, the human services nonprofit and the community college or the community college district, and then have not set either a minimum number or a maximum number of other partners, but really are more guided by the principle of partners who are substantively contributing to increasing social and economic mobility of your city's residents. Anything to add? We have another question. Is it okay if the MOU is in development?
So as we've currently written it during phase 1 or the letter of inquiry phase, a letter of support would suffice. However, if you are invited to phase 2, an MOU would need to be completed by that time.
So I would say for phase 1, uploading your draft MOU would help strengthen your letter of inquiry, but know that that would be great, but it won't be required until phase 2. We have 2 other questions. The first is it necessary to have an evaluation partner or include an evaluation in the budget? So it is not an eligibility criteria to have an evaluation partner, though we have specified that a evaluation partner is sort of to your benefit in the selection process. And specifically, we say that because we think it signals a partnership that is oriented to learning and to understanding to what extent they're making a difference and how might they improve both their partnership, but ultimately how they're supporting low-income residents in their cities. You'll see more information about how we're framing this on page 6 of the funding opportunity guidelines, where we've written out with more in more detail how we're thinking about those selection criteria that were up on the screen. Anything to add to that, Stephanie?
So one other thing I'd like to point out in the funding guidelines is there's a note about system review and systems changes. So, and that links to a paper that has some ideas. So when you're thinking evaluation, there's many models by which you can evaluate the work. And don't be narrow in your thinking if we're talking about systems reforms.
If a college begins an ATD application, are they eligible? I think this is one of those gray areas that we would want to explore and update the FAQ with. I think it depends on at what part of the ATD onboarding process the college is in. So look for a more thorough answer to that in the FAQs.
I'm loving all these questions we're getting.
Yes. Are multi-city proposals okay? Must agency and community college be in the same city or cities near each other? That is a great question.
Yeah, so I think this is a question we can answer more thoroughly in the FAQ next week. I would say that in the 2 primary partners, they should be in the same MSA, because it should be ideal that a participant could be both a client of the human service organization and go to the community college, and there may be geographic barriers if they're not.
Mm-hmm. The next question is, are you looking for co-locating services on campuses? We're open to co-location should that meet the large outcome of this funding opportunity, which is to increase social and economic mobility of low-income families in your community. So if you see co-location as an important strategy for achieving that outcome, I think we would be open to it and just want to hear the rationale for that being the primary or one of the approaches.
So there's a question about the Jobs for the Future document and the trajectory around jobs. The reality is occupation students. Sorry, I'm reading the question as we're.
How about we read it out loud for the whole group? When is a job just a job? Talks about a 5-year timeline for achieving higher pay. Is this a timeline that Boost will be prioritizing? We are a community college and human service organization partnership that is working on early childhood and K-12 career pathways. The reality is this occupation and students need a longer timeline to hit a higher pay of over $40,000 a year.
Yep. So you're really getting at the challenge we have when we think of intergenerational social and economic mobility. We're not going to see the results of that in a 3-year timeline. However, we're really looking for 2-gen approaches. So ideally, in the parent situation, they could be entering careers that would have a trajectory to get at that $40,000 a year wage, even if perhaps the child won't be reaching that for another 20 years.
I'd also add, and we can definitely look at this question and probably abstract it a bit so it has relevance to multiple career pathways. And respond to it more thoroughly in the FAQ. I would also just add, we're looking for, in the application period, your best case making about why the job pathways you're identifying are lifetime or springboard jobs. This is in part a recognition that Stephanie and I and our team are based here in Metro Detroit. We see a lot of things in our role, but we don't know deeply your community or what's needed in your community or what the jobs are like. So we'll want to see that case making about what are the careers that you've identified and why they should qualify as a lifetime or springboard job.
And just one thing to add on to that is what was different about the jobs for the future framing is that the way they looked at labor market data was different than an ONET or some other resources. It was taking a backward look because we're often told that certain entry-level jobs do have growth projection or growth trajectories and they don't actually achieve that. So we're looking that you've done a different or more thorough analysis to make sure that those entry careers have some sort of pathway or sustainability to them.
So I'm seeing, okay, some other questions. A cluster of questions around what's the definition of existing partnership and how long does the partnership have to be in existence prior to this funding opportunity? I think we'll give that question additional thought and update the FAQ to reflect our best thinking on it. So stay tuned to the FAQs posted on Monday for an answer to that. Another question, I think this one is for you, Stephanie, because it relates to the criteria for the human services nonprofit. Must it be a two-generation program? An existing two-generation
program. So we strongly encourage two-gen programs. We believe that serving both parent and child concurrently has reinforcing benefits. However, if you look at the Ascend framework, there's different places folks are on the continuum, and we would be open to folks that maybe have more of an emphasis on parent or child, but are moving toward the two-gen framework.
So we've got another question. Should we build travel costs for the convenience into the grant budget? For your preliminary budget, do not. We might, with the select few who move into the third rounds, engage in a conversation about if that's best put in your grant budget or funded through other resources that the foundation has. We have another question. Please give an example of what is an evaluation partner. So to the point that Stephanie was making is we are hoping that these partnerships are achieving change on multiple levels, that they are both driving towards better outcomes for the clients/students in terms of social and economic mobility, but we also hope that they're changing both how the human service nonprofit operates and how maybe the community college operates, so sort of outcomes on the institutional level, and then sort of arcing up from either the individual to the institutional level. We're also hoping that there might be some implications for systems or policy that come out of your work. So I think at any of those levels, you can adapt a certain type of an evaluation. We lift up in the funding opportunities, the funding opportunity guidelines is if some element of your work does include more programmatic, so direct services targeted to clients or college students, that you do think about program evaluation and how you could be using that to really understand whether you're making a difference for the ultimate beneficiaries. There's other models of evaluation, including a link to an article in the funding opportunities guidelines. It's Nancy Lytham's A Practical Guide to Evaluating Systems Change in a Human Service System Context. Will give you some other ideas. So we aren't coming into this with one pre-described notion of what an evaluation partner is or what would be an appropriate evaluation approach for your partnership and what you're trying to achieve, but are open to multiplicity of what you might need in your local context. Another question, this one's probably for me as the higher education person on this team. Is there a preference for instruction that leads to academic credit, or is workforce training an option? Again, I think we're really rooted in you making the case about what is the educational pathway needed to get to a family sustaining career in your community? If you can make the case that a non-credit workforce training program provides that kind of opportunity to your residents, we would be open to it. Similarly, if you can make that case for an academic or for credit pathway at your institution, we're open to that as well. It's really about that ultimate goal of family sustaining employment that has the opportunity for social and economic mobility for families that we're aiming to achieve. It looks like we don't have any new questions coming through. Oh, we've got one question around, can this grant be used for support the transition from high school to community college through college completion? Can clients start as high school students, including students who are parents, as long as holistic supports are provided for students and their families to support their success in school and life? So I think the questioner hit it on the head with their second part of their question, is we really are seeing this as a family strategy, as a two-generation strategy. So insofar as there's young adults in your service population that they too have children, and they could benefit from the combined efforts of the Human Services, nonprofit, and community college, that would be open. This is less about sort of your traditional 18-year-old who may not have children, but is clearly probably experiencing barriers to transitioning to college. It's less about that sort of traditional aged high school student. Anything to add to that, Stephanie?
No, that makes sense to me, especially as the Human Service Organization may be serving that younger population.
We're scanning for additional questions, and we'll just take a minute to get to the next set. All right, we have another question. If the full program includes community colleges that are not ATD, can the grant only be restricted to the ones that are part of ATD, or can funding be used to support the entire program? With this level of specificity, I think that might be a question that's better answered once we actually see your letter of inquiry. As long as the primary community college partner is an Achieving the Dream college, feel free to submit, and we'll try to understand better the configuration that you're describing during our review process. Scanning questions. Some of these are repeats that we've already answered and will be updated in the FAQ. We have a question about lobbying on specific local bills. So as a private foundation, we are not able to support any lobbying. So that would not be an allowable cost under this grant.
We would like to emphasize, we're seeing a lot of questions that are very similar. So when we update the frequently asked questions and post them by Monday, we'll try to be inclusive to address some of the nuances in the questions we're receiving. So we're coming up at time. We are going to just silence our phone for a moment. If folks want to continue to ask questions, if there's any new ones that come up, we will try to address them. Otherwise, we thank you for joining them, but we will stay on the line for a few minutes to answer any new ones that come up. So there's a question about community colleges working with employers on on-the-job training or apprenticeship type programs that would be of interest. If done with a whole family barrier removal approach, would that be eligible? And I would say yes, if it fits within the framework of Springboard and lifetime jobs related to that on-the-job training apprenticeship piece of it.
And I would just add to that answer, yes, hopefully these OTJ and apprenticeship type programs are aligned with the sort of family sustaining careers that are implicit in the lifetime and Springboard jobs framework. But I would also say we are really looking for partnerships that are, yes, delivering programs, but also arcing up into thinking about how the kind of programs, these different kind of programs they're offering, changes how the human services nonprofit operates or how the community college institution operates overall, and potentially thinking about what are the lessons from that kind of work for broader systemic or policy level changes. So as long as you can have that through line so that this is not just a boutique program, but something with broader relevance and increased scale for change, it could be a viable application.
So there's a question, how does the nonprofit demonstrate the two-generation approach? I would recommend you visit the website Ascend, the Aspen Institute, which is referenced in the funding opportunity guidelines for some information about two-gen approaches.
Another question, the LOI asks for 3-year graduation and transfer rates. Will preference be given to colleges that have better rates? Not necessarily. I think we'll want to reflect on this question a bit more, and we'll include it in an updated FAQ. But we are interested in colleges that have substantial improvement to be made and see the partnership with their human service nonprofit as a way to improve those outcomes.
Based on the example budget, are you only considering multi-year awards? Yes, we are looking to fund a cohort that will be for 3-year grant awards beginning in the grant period we're anticipating will begin December 1st of this year and go for 3 years after that.
We're going to mute our phone again just for a second while we see if we get any new and different questions that have broad relevance to all audience members. So stay on the line. If you're asking an additional question, we will try to answer it.
So there's a question if there's going to be future offerings of Boost. I saw one question said, if I'm not ready this year, will it come up again? At this point, we're planning Boost to begin in 2019 and do a lot of learning, and we'll reevaluate if there will be future iterations.
We've got an additional question about, would all students in the cohort have to be completed their degrees by the end of the grant? So just to clarify, when we use the term cohort, we're talking more about the cohort of the 8 partnerships that will be receiving grant funding from Kresge and engaging in the other auxiliary benefits that Stephanie outlined: the learning cohort, the technical assistance, the learning evaluation agenda. In terms of sort of at the community level, as you think about the ultimate beneficiaries for your partnership, whether that is current students of the community college or future students from, say, the clients of the human service organizations, no, they won't necessarily have to complete their degrees within the 3-year time frame. While we all know we aspire to, say, an AA completion on a 2-year, maybe 3-year time frame, we do recognize that that can take longer. And so we're not anchored in particularly that degree time frame.
So we are at 1:30 Eastern time and would like to be respectful of everybody's time today. We thank you for joining us, and we will post an updated frequently asked questions and a recording of the webinar on the Kresge website by this Monday, July 31st.
July
1st. Oh my goodness, sorry, July 1st. Thank you all.
Thank you.